Hi everybody, I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Hi everybody, we're back in San Francisco in an area of town that used to be called Eureka Valley, but for the past 30 years it's been called the Castro. It is a symbolic gathering place for gay men and women from around the country. Many have migrated here to the Castro, but this neighborhood has undergone many changes over the years, particularly since the 1906 earthquake. Peter Stein has produced an award-winning documentary for PBS about this neighborhood, and he explained to me as we did a walk-around just how Eureka Valley, now the Castro, has changed.
Right now we're standing at the corner of 18th and Castro, and that's sort of ground zero in the Castro neighborhood. At the time in 1906, happily enough, the neighborhood was spared. The earthquake did not really rattle too many of the houses in this neighborhood, and we are now several miles west of downtown San Francisco. So at the time in 1906, this was an outlying neighborhood of Victorian houses, most of them 2 and 3 families living in them, mainly Irish and Scandinavian. The fire that swept through San Francisco did not reach this far. So this neighborhood, which at the time was named Eureka Valley, was spared, and that's why you have a lot of the old housing stock, beautiful Victorians that survive to this day.
It's not technically a continuation of Divisadero. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you
because
are.
I think I used to call it Divisaderato or something until I checked the spelling. But the major north-south street in this part of San Francisco ends up here. It's kind of a collector coming down from the north side that I can just see in the early days. It is near the intersection of Market, which the name tells you what it was in many ways, and this major north-south street. I mean, it must have been a real transportation hub, too.
It was a transportation hub. In fact, its main significance, really, before the urban pocket that we know it is today, is that it was the end of the line for the Market Street streetcar. This is where the streetcars that would start down at the ferry building would take people up and dead end here at the corner of Castro and Market. Now, right around World War I, they extended the line, and a tunnel was built to the western half of the city, and you had sand dunes that suddenly became tracts of homes. But this neighborhood always was important as a kind of transportation terminus, and, as you say, a hub. But it was really, I don't want to overbuild it, it was for many, many years a rather sleepy, quiet little neighborhood that kept to itself, that was beloved by the people who lived here as a great place to grow up, with a very active church, Most Holy Redeemer Church. Schools were, you'd go to the neighborhood grammar school and the neighborhood high school and the neighborhood church, and it was so close to downtown that people could live and work easily and not feel that they had a big commute. And
yet, I would assume in the days before this became just blocks and blocks of blocks here in San Francisco, there was that isolation, that you were almost out of town when you got here.
Absolutely. When the neighborhood was first laid out, they had to advertise for people to come out here because it was seen as being absolutely out in the country. There were dairy farms here, there was a brick quarry up on the hill, but as happened so quickly in San Francisco, that the population was just burgeoning in the 1880s and 1890s, and very quickly what had been scattered dairy farms became rows and rows of, now we'd say, quaint Victorian houses.
It is so difficult in a way, and let's cross the street. I want to make a big loop. We'll cross 18th Street. It is so difficult once the buildings go up, once the grass disappears. It's like a freeway goes in. Once the grass grows and the scars heal, it's hard to remember what that block used to look like. And you say, oh yeah, there used to be a car dealership there.
Where we just crossed, if it had been 100 years ago, our feet would be wet, because in fact we just crossed what had been a little stream, which explains why a lot of the important businesses of this neighborhood collected right along where the stream used to run on 18th Street. And now, of course, it's completely paved.
I asked Peter about the difficulties of putting together any documentary, but for example this one, finding the old film, the old photograph to actually show how the neighborhood has changed over the years.
That's one of the great challenges and one of the great joys of doing historical documentaries, is it's a treasure hunt. Sometimes what you tell can only be achieved well by the pictures that you have to tell it. And the other main element, of course, is the people that you have to tell your story. San Francisco has always been a city of collectors, of people totally in love with the city's history, even if they themselves are newcomers. And so San Francisco is full of small collections, people who have amassed great quantities of photographs, but we also had to look for home movies, pictures of domestic life in the neighborhood. And when it comes to the story of the gay population in San Francisco, much of that before the 1970s was not very well recorded because that was not something that people felt very public about.
Let's talk about that. I remember having a discussion with someone in Key West some time ago, trying to figure out when the first wave of gay store owners came into Key West. Bring us through chronologically, if you will, when gay men and lesbians first realized that this was a safe place, that they could, as you said before going on the air, plant their flag here.
I think to understand why this explosion of gay life happened in the Castro, we need to look back briefly at how it is that gay men and women came to San Francisco in the first place. As early as the 1910s and 20s, San Francisco had a freewheeling reputation as a place where you could be yourself.
I guess in some ways the word bohemian really described this city, and being a port city, that had a big influence on it.
Absolutely, and you have advertisements going back into the 1920s that for clubs and nightclubs in the North Beach section of San Francisco that advertised what we call now gender-bending kind of reviews. It was fascinating to me to discover this.
Now, this was how long ago?
This was already 70 years ago in the 1920s. Now, this was, of course, had nothing to do with the neighborhood that we're now in. But World War II made a huge change in the demographics of San Francisco. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people came through San Francisco in their war duties, as they did in New York and Baltimore and the major port cities. Many of them found and fell in love with San Francisco, and of course many of those people were gay. And what developed after World War II was a very concentrated gay nightlife, but it was still an underground culture. And what I wanted to make sure I told in the documentary in trying to set the stage for what this gay world was like in San Francisco was that despite its reputation as a very tolerant city, San Francisco suffered, just as many places in America did, a very severe set of crackdowns and prohibitions against open gay behavior. So gay men, but also lesbians, were quite brutally discriminated against. It was illegal to be served a drink openly in a bar if you were considered to be a homosexual. You couldn't gather openly in public places. Gay life everywhere, including in San Francisco, was really relegated to behind closed doors, to nighttime. And if you did have neighborhoods, so to speak, where gay people congregated, it was not in the sense of neighborhood that we think of today. It wasn't, for example, the way we think of ethnic neighborhoods at Chinatown or a North End in Boston or a Japantown, where 24 hours a day people of a community came together to live and to work as well as to play. And this is what made the Castro unique, was that it was the first time that a 24-hour-a-day open life was claimed by gays and lesbians.
Peter, thanks for taking us through here. It's a great documentary produced by KQED in San Francisco. You guys have done so much good work there. I thank you for this one and for showing us around.
Thanks, Dennis. It's been a pleasure.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.